Hi, everybody. Hope you all are hearing me. I was just there. I'm just streaming this over to Facebook. And let's make sure I have everything else squared away. You can all hear, yeah, fingers crossed that this will all work well. And I hope everyone had a lovely day today. It was certainly that and more. And I'm looking for,
for having me. Greetings, Windsor County Democrats, and everyone tuning in tonight. It's wonderful to be back in Windsor County virtually. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge that we are still in a global pandemic and to congratulate everyone who's here tonight. I think it's such a testament to democracy that we're still connecting virtually, and thinking about the Vermont that we want for the future. I also wanted to recognize that it is Memorial Day and take a moment just to honor all of Vermont's fallen and Vermont's heroes around the state and all of our veterans and families. So this will be a historic election, not only at the national level, but also right here at home in Vermont. We can't go back, we will go forward, and we can't leave any Vermonters behind. We've been stalled here in Vermont on so many of the issues that will take Vermont forward and will make Vermont a prosperous, inviting, and safe place to live. We've been stalled on paid family leave. We've left a fourth of Vermont without access to internet and broadband. We've been stalled on taking real action to mitigate the impact of climate change across the state, and we see that every single day. We've been stalled on making Vermont the best place to live for this generation, a generation that wants to come here, and future generations. We're at a crossroads, and we need leaders in statewide office who share our Vermont values of care for our communities and care for our neighbors, and are prepared to work hard. I'm a product of Vermont's education system. I grew up at Four Corners Farm, just up the valley in Orange County in a town called Newberry. I am a proud graduate of the University of Vermont and Vermont Law School, where I now teach at night. I worked for our congressman, helped get him elected, and moved to Washington, where I helped run his office. I've served in the halls of Congress, working with congressional staff and congressional committees. I've led field missions of policymakers into conflict zones with the Red Cross. I helped launch an international association and worked with the State Department and international partners to protect and fight for human rights. I came home to Vermont because I love our state and I care about our future. I've lived in South Royalton and Bethel, in Tunbridge, in Rutland, where I worked for a federal judge. I worked through law school serving beer at the Worthy Burger, and I now serve as an assistant attorney general in Montpelier. And I'm running for lieutenant governor because we are at this crossroads. We have to move forward. We have to transform Vermont into the Vermont that we want for the future. A Vermont where we do have rural communities that thrive. A Vermont where we are the best place to raise and support families from infants to elders. And a Vermont where we've protected the land and environment for future generations. So I'm pleased to be here tonight. I'm pleased to work hard and to earn your vote. I'm pleased to be able to fight for us and to bring us together. And I look forward to serving as your next lieutenant governor. Thank you for having me. I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Molly. Our next is Debbie Ingram. Debbie, you've got the mic. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Al, and thanks everybody for being here tonight. It's great to have a good crowd, especially on a holiday. So my name is Debbie Ingram. I am a state senator representing Chittenden County, and I serve on the Health and Welfare Committee and on the Education Committee, two big policy committees. I also serve as the executive director, and have done so for the last 13 years, of a coalition of caring, inclusive congregations. It's called Vermont Interfaith Action. It's a nonprofit that uses community organizing methods to listen to people at the grassroots and try to affect systemic change around issues of social justice. So over the years, we've worked on affordable housing and on healthcare, on criminal justice reform, on what we call a moral economy, on racial justice, and education. And I have taken those same skills and interests and issues to my role in the Senate. I also served on the Williston Select Board and the Williston Planning Commission for 12 years total, so I have municipal experience as well. I love Vermont. I came here originally actually in the year 2000. My now ex-partner and I were living in Bangladesh at the time, where we were both working for non-government organizations, working in various kinds of poverty alleviation projects. We had lived there for 7 years. But we were very interested in getting a civil union as soon as the civil unions law passed here in Vermont. So we came that first time and traveled all around the state, from Woodstock down through Brattleboro over to Bennington and up through Middlebury and Burlington and over into the Northeast Kingdom, and just fell in love with Vermont. So unfortunately, my relationship with my ex fell apart, but my relationship with Vermont has flourished ever since then. I like to say that I have been a Democrat since I was in the womb, because my parents were dyed-in-the-wool FDR Democrats. I grew up in a small town, a farming area in the southern part of the state of Georgia near Savannah. My parents taught me, my dad was mayor of our little town and he died when I was 16, but his legacy and the teachings of my mom were that the Democratic Party is the party of working people, of labor unions and farmers. It's the party that gives people who may not have a lot of wealth and power a fair shake. And they were also big proponents of the civil rights movement. And I was taught to respect the dignity of every person as well. So these are things that I have also taken with me as I have run for office. Now, before the COVID crisis struck, I had chosen 3 issue areas that I felt were the most important. One is affordable housing, because I think the lack of affordability of our housing here in Vermont causes us to lose more people than any other factor. Healthcare, I'm a big proponent of universal healthcare and want to get us as close as possible to that. And then economic dignity, or what I termed a moral economy, so that we're making sure that no more Vermonters have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I think that's wrong. So those are my priorities before the COVID crisis, and after the COVID crisis, I think even more so are those extremely important. And the way I view this crisis is that on the one hand, it has really shone a bright light on the gaps that we already have in our systems and the way that that we have not done the things that we need to do. If, for instance, we had universal health care already, we wouldn't have had to worry about paying for testing and treatment of the disease. But on the other hand, this crisis has also shown us that we can, when we have the courage and the political will, we can actually make changes almost literally overnight. We can house homeless people. We can make sure that we have cash assistance to people who need it. We can really make big changes. And I also think coming out of this, people are going to be hurting. They're going to need some healing. And I have a lot of experience listening to folks and treating them with compassion. I've been through some hard knocks myself and come through on the other side. So for all these reasons, I think that I am the kind of visionary, strong, and compassionate leader that we're going to need for these times.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate that. By the way, there's, first of all, if you're listening via our Facebook page, which is Windsor County Dems, facebook.com/Windsor County Dems, I forgot to click one last button, which actually made it live. So we were a little late. Sorry about that, but it is running live now. Molly, there's another Molly Gray waiting to log in. I don't think that's you, and that's why I asked you to unmute again, because I was concerned that perhaps it was undoing your unmute thing. Maybe not. Let's just try it. Should I admit that is that somebody else?
No, we're all set. Thank you.
So I don't have to address the second Molly Gray. All right.
You don't.
I
Thank you very much.
I didn't want to be, rude or anything and say no. So our next is Brenda Siegel. You have 5 minutes to do the same as our first two have.
Thank you all, and thank you so much for having me tonight. In 2018, when I first announced my run for governor, a lot of you might remember that the first article that came out about me said something like, "From the Bennington battlefields to the Derby line, you can hear a resounding who?" Because we couldn't even conceive of someone like me running for an office like that, a low-income single mom, or really even having a place in our government at all. But what Vermonters showed us in that election is not only do they want their leaders to reflect the experiences that they've had, but also that they understand that when people who have faced the problems are at the decision-making table, then real solutions emerge. And we're seeing examples of that all across the state with COVID-19 as people are standing up and creating their own mutual aid networks and leading in organizations. And if what they can do is stay at home and homeschool their kids while they also work from home like I'm doing, then that's what they're doing to keep people safe. We've also seen examples of that with our youth and young adults who are marching and rallying and climate, and sometimes even interrupting our very own legislature on issues of climate change. And we've seen the Global Warming Solutions Act, and we can see a Green Mountain New Deal as well. I think that we're also seeing right now during COVID-19 that when science dictates we must make change, we can change our behavior. And so I'd like to see us do that with climate change as well. I think we owe that to ourselves and our children and the earth. And this is not my first experience with crisis. In 2011, my son and I lost all of our belongings in Tropical Storm Irene. It was communities just like are happening now that helped us clean out 28 cubic yards of our belongings. And then coming out of that crisis, I started the Southern Vermont Dance Festival as a long-term economic driver for my area. What we did is we connected arts and recreation and agriculture to our businesses and downtown government to come up with a creative solution to drive the economy for many years to come. This would be our 8th year if we could have a festival this year. But I'm really glad the structure is in place. I do think we're going to need that same exact kind of creative thinking coming into each community. It will be unique to each community, but we do need people on the ground to understand how to do that work. A lot of folks know that on March 7th of 2018 was when I decided that I would run for governor. On March 8th of 2018, my nephew died of a heroin overdose. He was the son of my brother who died just over 20 years ago, also while using heroin. And what I know is that we need to focus on harm reduction first, treatment and recovery on demand, including medically assisted treatment on demand, dual diagnosis support, and criminal justice reform. And that is why I've spent the last 2 years working across the state and country with elected leaders, state's attorneys, police chiefs, people in recovery, and active use and family members to make sure that we are moving drug policy that will save lives forward. But we can't really stop there. We need to make sure that we're strengthening and supporting our education system. First and foremost in this particular moment is ensuring that we're fully funding our education system and not falling prey to the governor's suggestions, which would end up underfunding our education system. In addition, we need to make sure that we're expanding broadband for the parents who are at home and also for our students, because education was not equitable before and it needs to become equitable now. We need to have universal meals, which would have helped us out right now as well. In addition, we really need to build a bottom-up economy. So coming out of this crisis, we need all of the tools: paid family and medical leave, minimum wage, livable wage. We need to do all of that, but those are tools. We need to decide on our goal, and our goal is to have a society where not only people can survive, but they also can thrive. And so we need to grab the tools along the way that get us there, as Debbie said, to a moral economy. And as a teacher, a movement builder, and a business owner, I've been a business owner for 18 years, I know that what it's going to take to make those changes is to bring the people to the people's house. I understand that when we work together, we will build the strongest Vermont possible. And so I will work in partnership with all of you and people across the state to ensure that we are moving forward policy that puts people and the planet first.
Thank you, Brenda. Appreciate that. And Tim, Ash, you are our fourth to do that opening comments.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Al, and thanks to the Windsor Democrats for hosting this. My name's Tim Ash, running for Lieutenant Governor. I currently serve as the president of the state Senate, so I serve alongside Alice, Allison, and Dick, the three Windsor County state senators. I do see some Orange County folks here, so also Senator Mark McDonald. Before I get into why I'm running for office and why I think I'm the best candidate, I just want to say a quick word of gratitude. One of the most profound experiences I've had leading the Senate the last few years was when we were able to pass the first meaningful gun safety legislation in Vermont's history. Many people in Gun Sense Vermont's leadership and activist community hail from Windsor County, and I watched year after year the persistence with which they pursued universal background checks. And so when 2 years ago we were able to finally pass significant gun safety legislation, it wasn't because elected officials had somehow figured out what the right thing to do. It was really the pressure that had built from activists around the state, but really the hub of that activism was right here in Windsor County. And I see some of the names of those people on this call tonight. So thank you for that. So my primary reason for running for Lieutenant Governor is because I believe we need to close what I call the gap in the two Vermonts. When I talk about the two Vermonts, I'm not talking just about the difference between struggling rural communities and some of the more urban communities who have more vibrant economies. I'm also talking about pockets within all of our towns where people are struggling with either addiction or poverty, mental health challenges, social isolation. So one of the things that's always happens during election season is we often, it's the job of state government to be accused of never being good enough, and often it isn't. But I do think it's important to take stock about what we have achieved. I've been very proud working with the other 29 senators, Speaker Mitzi Johnson in the House, to pass significant legislation the last 3 years. In fact, some of the most progressive legislation in the United States in that time. In that time, we passed one of the first significant minimum wage increases in many, many years with just a vote to spare in the House to override the governor's second veto of a minimum wage increase. We passed something that had eluded governors and legislators for many years, long-term funding for water quality improvements, not just of Lake Champlain, but the Connecticut River and small streams and lakes and ponds throughout the state. We have made major strides on climate change legislation with one of the cleanest electrical grids in the state. We've doubled weatherization funding, and we have been increasing our investments in transportation strategies so that we can reduce people's harmful transportation emissions, working with organizations like Advanced Transit in your neck of the woods. We've codified women's reproductive rights right in our statutes and set in motion a constitutional amendment to further protect that. We twice blocked very reckless proposals from Governor Scott to make deep cuts into the K-12 public education system. Sometimes we forget that stopping bad ideas is also important. And just this year, the Senate recently passed a hazard pay bill to provide $60 million of cash grants to the 30,000 or so essential workers who during COVID-19 have been showing up every single day, putting themselves at risk putting their families at risk, often not making much money at all. We're hopeful that the House will take that up, and we're hopeful that the governor will ultimately sign it into law. It would make us the only state at this point that has put our money where our mouth is, so that we don't just say, oh yeah, we're really thankful they all did that heroic work, and then they're the only ones who seem to not get any bit of the federal relief. Among the strategies that I believe we need to deploy to close the gap in the two Vermonts are to continue to bolster our investment in our rural communities, our outdoor recreation economy, building first-time home ownership, building upon a program that we established that I helped write that has already provided 1,000 young people support to become first-time homeowners, almost none of whom, incidentally, are in Chittenden County, but instead are spread around counties who desperately need young workers. We also need to really bolster our anti-poverty strategies. We have dozens of programs all throughout state government, and yet still thousands of young people fall through the cracks who don't go on to further higher education or into the workforce. That's a particular area of passion of mine. And I also believe that we need, even in tight times like this, it's a moment where you reflect on what your real values are. And our tradition of conserving farms and forest lands is no less important today in economic difficult times than it is in good times. So I'm really committed to continuing our strong path towards land conservation, which also has all sorts of benefits in terms of recreation and water quality. So
Tim,
I'll
we're at the 5. Okay, if that's okay, but
Right.
And we're actually going to cover more of those things. So I don't want to.
Great.
You'll have more time. In fact, kind of on all of our minds, and one of the questions that has come up over the last few days is that, given the current pandemic crisis, and despite Vermont doing relatively better, then I think we're in the very high, the best of list, one of the 1 or 2 or 3, but obviously it's still been quite a challenge, and curious and want to know what issues our state, and you were just talking about that, Tim, though the first question goes actually to Brenda Siegel, will be the person to have a chance to answer that question. What are the key issues that our state should learn from this experience? Not only what we've done in the last few months, but where we're heading towards it, and what we can use from that to manifest change. And some of the things that Tim was just mentioning, healthcare and food security and homelessness and so forth. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, but if you could each have a chance, Brenda, you first, you've got 2 minutes to kind of share what you'd imagine we could do in the using the leverage of the current pandemic crisis. Are you muted again? Well, I didn't do anything. I have to ask you to unmute. You've got to, it says you have to do that. There, try now.
I apologize. I have my child in the house and I had to do it really quickly. So
I see. Okay. All right. So go ahead. You're on.
So
you got 2 minutes.
So I actually think that we can learn so much. I hate to use the word opportunity coming out of this because so many people are hurting, but what I really want us to hold on to is that people have been hurting for a long time across our state and across the country. And some of what people who have never felt before are feeling now has been happening for many of us, my family included, for a very long time. So I think that one thing that we did really well is we took care of each other and ourselves. We stayed home. We protected ourselves. We did that even before the governor's stay safe order. People really on their own were like, this needs to happen right now. And they did. So that is something that I think we can almost always count on Vermonters for in a crisis. They really are good at this. But I think we need to center, we are right now in the shell of an economy that was relying on people that were just below, just at, or just above the margin. And so the minute that we had this crisis, the economy is crumbling. And we need to have a stronger base than that. And so I think that we need to take the shell of the economy that we're in and build better this time. We need to build from the bottom up. We need to center people who are marginalized. We need to make sure that we're focusing on racial justice issues, because in our own state, people of color are being more impacted by COVID than white folks. And even though we have a smaller percentage of folks who are people of color, the percentage who are being impacted is higher. So we want to make sure that we are centering those folks, because when we do that, when we center the people who are the most vulnerable, then we all rise together. And so I think that's something that we can do. And yes, that means a lot of changes, but those are what I call strategic investments. You know, $15 an hour is great, but we need to get to livable wage, and not necessarily right away, but we do need to be heading there. And we need to have, we need to work on universal health care. These are all things that we already knew, but now we have this moment in time that we can grab onto and make real changes.
Great.
In addition to broadband, I'll just
Okay.
add with that, broadband.
All right, good. Well, that's a good list. And actually next, Molly, you're up next on this. Can you unmute yourself, or do I have to do that? I have to do it. All right. If you could just add to that, I mean, you've got a minute or so, and then it sounds like, I mean, one of the next things we'll get to is the economy and how we make this a more robust and fair economy. But Molly, things you'd want to add, change, or expand upon as to what was just said.
It shouldn't take a global pandemic for us to realize that we've left a fourth of Vermonters without access to the internet, and without access to equal education, without access to telemedicine, without access to economic opportunity. We're not going to bring people to rural Vermont without that kind of investment, and it shouldn't take COVID-19 for us to realize that. We need to prioritize childcare. We need to prioritize paid family leave, so no person has to choose between paying the bills and caring for family, not only in a pandemic, but every single day. And finally, we've distributed over 500,000 meals ready to eat. Thank you to our National Guard. Thank you to the Vermont Food Bank for doing that. But that should be a wake-up call when it comes to food insecurity in Vermont, and the fact that we need to build and grow our local, resilient food system and support our farmers, and especially in Windsor County in the Upper Valley.
Thank you, Molly. And actually, Tim, I know you actually were kind of referring to some of these things, but just in a minute or less, if you could extrapolate a little bit further, go ahead.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I would say that one of the greatest challenges in public leadership that I've faced has been working with the governor and the speaker to lead the state through what have been 2.5 months of excruciating pain for many people on the public health side and also on the economic side. But I do think Vermont is positioned almost compared to other states. It is one of the top performing states in terms of the comprehensive nature of our public health measures and our economic response. I think we all have appreciated how quickly communities have come together to respond to the sudden shock of unemployment going from 2% to more than 20% effectively overnight. I think what we will use the coming months to do, and I'm working with my peers in the Senate right now, is to make substantial investments in school facilities, broadband in communities that don't have it, and then further strengthening the relationships between buyers and sellers of local produce. Sometimes, we have to look at state government and the constraints that are often put on us. We have a governor who has said he would veto literally like $1 in fees each of the last 3 years. The legislature obviously has been working with some constraints there. But with the federal aid we've received, it's a wonderful opportunity to start making some of the investments, which frankly can only be done sometimes when the federal government brings substantial amounts of money like the $1.25 billion that thanks to Senator Leahy, we were able to receive.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. And Debbie, your minute on that, please.
Sure, thank you. Well, I would reiterate the 3 things that I mentioned in my opening remarks. I think this pandemic has revealed the gaps in our housing system, in our healthcare, and in our economy, economic dignity for workers. If people had already been making a decent wage, they would have savings to fall back on. They would, they wouldn't be in the the dire straits that a lot of people are, and it's really terrible. I would also add to that definitely broadband for not just for remote learning, but also for telehealth and telemedicine, which is something we've been working on quite a lot in the Health and Welfare Committee that I serve on. Childcare has emerged as a huge issue for our not just essential workers, but all of our workers, all of our parents. Very important. And I would also add to that our colleges, and we all rose to the occasion when our state colleges were threatened. But this pandemic has helped us to see how important they are to our communities, to our students, and as employment centers.
Great. Thank you for that. And of course, we are going to get to those. There's a number of things I wrote down in terms of reinvigorating the economy. Broadband is on our list, food security, a number of those things. Before we dig into the specific policy areas, and Molly, you're up for this one for the initial response, though I'll have to ask you to unmute again. The lieutenant governor position has a very limited portfolio. You preside at Senate sessions, you cast tie-breaking votes. Do you see other possibilities for the office? Will you be active in support of legislation before the legislature? And if so, what ways would you try to expand the effectiveness of the lieutenant governor office?
The lieutenant governor is so uniquely placed to help build a bridge between our communities across Vermont, to bring more Vermont into Montpelier at a time when, as I mentioned, we've left so much of Vermont behind. My goal is to reinvigorate, to reinvent this office, to allow it to be a real platform for solving a lot of our demographic challenges, to taking us forward on all of the policies that we have been stalled on. Like I said, we have been stalled on paid family leave. We haven't put families in Vermont at the heart of the office. We haven't put our rural communities. We have over 30 co-working spaces around Vermont. We have thousands of young farmers and food producers. There's so much happening here in this state. And I think it's time to use this office as the real convener for bold action that's going to transform our state and take us forward. Second, we need a lieutenant governor who shares our values of hard work and community, knows our communities, and is going to work with the lieutenant governor, or with the governor, excuse me, who's going to be there at the table every single day, whomever the governor may be, he or she, and really take us forward, who's going to be a collaborator, who's going to put people before politics and progress before power. That is what I see and I envision and I intend for that office.
Great. And you have 45 more seconds if you want. It's up to you.
We'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. Well said. I like the succinctness. Tim, you're next on this one. Actually, and again, it's the lieutenant governor position as it's designed, and how would you perhaps try to expand the effectiveness of that office if you were lieutenant governor?
Yeah, thank you, Al. The lieutenant governor's position is well situated between the largely administrative and political function of the executive branch, and then the more granular and often parochial approach of the legislature. So how I envision using the lieutenant governor's office is a lot like what I've been doing in recent years as the Senate president. I have crisscrossed the state numerous times, meeting with people on the front lines of mental health, youth employment, local chambers of commerce, local transportation officials, and many other issues where I've traveled around, and I don't meet with the board of directors of the organization or just the leadership, but with the frontline staff to find out what's really going on and how we can help them be more successful in their work and meet Vermonters' needs. I've come back to the legislature, handed off to my contemporaries the best ideas that I've heard from out in the field, and then we've seen real action on those. Managing the Senate for the last 3 years has been an amazing honor, don't get me wrong, but liberated from that day-to-day management will empower me to do precisely what I've enjoyed doing the most, which is being that bridge between the community and real action in the legislature. I have a record of being able to take that vision into action, and I
Great.
expect the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Thanks. Thank you. Brenda, you're next on that, which I think I have to ask you to unmute too. So go ahead. You're good.
So first of all, I think unique to this crisis, I think actually right after elected, I would be going into each and every community and working with the town governments, businesses, and people on the ground to figure out what they need in order to have creative economic solutions to drive their economy. So that I think would be an essential piece that is unique to this crisis, although could be used in rural communities in regular times. I also think that one of the things that's really suffering is our democracy in terms of engagement from people on the ground who maybe can't come to the State House and engage like I do regularly. And so I have had the vision of setting up some State House 101 trainings, both at the State House, virtually, and in the communities, to help people figure out how they can engage with our democracy. What can they do to really be part of this to make the change? And then connecting those folks to their legislators, to working with the governor and figuring out how we do, I've done a lot of work both with Democrats, progressives, and Republicans, all with Democrats, progressives, and Republicans on policy issues that are important to me. And I think it's extremely important that Vermonters understand how they can engage, even if they're like myself, a single mom, and sometimes just stuck in their home.
Great.
And have to do it that way.
Thank you, Brenda. Debbie, the next, that same question to you for a minute.
Great, thank you. Yes, the Lieutenant Governor doesn't have very many designated duties, but I would quickly highlight 3 things I think are important. One is you want the Lieutenant Governor, in the case of the worst case scenario, to be somebody who is well prepared to step in to, if heaven forbid they had to be governor. So I think you want somebody who has elected experience, who has experience in the legislature and with the administration. Secondly, I too would like to go around the state to sponsoring forums, talking about issues, and really listening to people. I think that it shouldn't just be a one-way conversation. It needs to be listening to Vermonters. And then third, I think the Lieutenant Governor can really set the mood in the State House. The Lieutenant Governor is there more than the governor. And I really want to bring a certain warmth and collegiality. I want to shepherd women who are newly elected. I want to shepherd people of color, younger people, and really create a kind of mood where we can all work together well.
Great. Thank you very much. And actually stay right there, Deb, because you're up for the next one. And I've had actually people email me different forms of this question, but it boils down to your ideas on, some people just brought up funding of our state colleges, post-secondary, but also others mentioned changing roles potentially. And so I'd be curious to hear from you. 2 minutes for the initial response, and then from each of the rest. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, this is something serving on the education committee that I've spent a lot of time talking about and taking testimony on. Well, first of all, we have been told for many years, actually, the legislature have been told for many years, reminded that we spend less money as a state on our state colleges than I think only 1 or 2 other states. So that has been a huge problem for a long time that we really need to address. And then this recent crisis, really brought it to the forefront. So first of all, we have to make a commitment to invest in our colleges. In this transition period, we can use federal dollars to make sure that the colleges continue as they are, and that the trustees and the legislature can hire analysts and consultants to help us consider new options. And we have to look at, some students want to have a place where they can go to have that college experience that's on a campus. Other students are quite happy to do remote learning, and that actually fits their lifestyle better. So we need to have a mix, I think, of both of those. But we really need, as a state, to decide that these are institutions that we must invest in. Another thing that we can do, VSAC is a wonderful resource for our Vermont students. We actually send $5 million a year out of state, though. I think we need to say, you know, those financial aid funds need to be spent in the state for state colleges to support our state colleges. But we really have to decide that this is something that we want to do, and then we have to make room for it in the budget. And at first, we can use some of the federal funds to get us off the ground, and then we need to, moving forward, find the money in the budget to support our state colleges.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate that. Brenda, you're next on that, so I'll ask you to unmute, and you should be good.
Now we've got a routine going.
Yeah, we're getting it.
So, I've taught in our public schools for a long time, and I'm also an adjunct professor at Landmark College, which is not one of our state schools. But I do think that I know that we need to start talking. It's always been problematic that we talk about college separately from K through 12 education. We need to decide to fully fund education from, in our forum we did recently, someone said from cradle to grave. There's a lot of reasons why people across our state need to have these educational services. And the fact that we would even consider closing schools where those might be the only schools that some of our students can go to, many of our students can go to. And not only that, we want to make sure that they can study the same type of topics that kids in other schools can study. We're not deciding for them what they're allowed to study based on their income. And so I think we have to start talking about funding in a very different way, in a meaningful way that addresses for the 4 years in college as well,
Great.
Comprehensively.
Thank you, Brenda. Next on that is Molly. You're up next. I got to unmute you as well. There you go.
Thank you. I think now is the time to stop talking about deciding, to stop talking about deciding and thinking about funding our state colleges. Now is the time to fund our state colleges, and here's why. We have 62 high-paying jobs in Vermont, according to the McClure Foundation. We have the largest recruitment and retention challenges ever in nursing, in education, in law enforcement, in all of the jobs that we need in our rural communities to make them whole. All you need to do is come to my hometown of Newberry and take a drive, and you'll know what I'm talking about. So now more than ever, we need to act and take true action. For the last 5 years, the state colleges have been going to our legislature asking for real contributions and real funding to support workforce development here in Vermont. So now is the time to act. Now is the time to commit right now to supporting our state colleges by committing $25 million over the next 5 years, $5 million a year, and creating a task force that will focus on workforce development here in Vermont to ensure that every Vermonter can go from the classroom to the community and have a job, and those jobs exist.
Great. Thank you, Molly. And Tim, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I've taught 3 courses at the Community College of Vermont, so I know how critical public higher education is for many people throughout our state. It's one of the reasons why when the Chancellor proposed closing 3 campuses, I joined the Speaker to block the vote of the Board of Trustees of the state college system, committed to having what we call bridge funding to allow us to think about how we transform those 3 campuses moving forward, integrating them better with career and technical training, as well as your more conventional higher ed offerings. It's worth noting that the Chancellor of the system several years ago came to the legislature and said, if you give us $4 million more a year, we'll be sustainable moving forward. The legislature gave the state college system $4 million, and then they were back the next year saying they were in financial distress. So it's very easy to talk about how this is merely a money question, but one of the challenges is also with a declining number of high school students, which of course is a bad thing, there are fewer students in the pipeline to go to our higher ed institutions, which is why we need to think about how we transform those 3 campuses in ways that support higher ed, but also allow partnerships with the public and private sectors and nonprofit so those campuses can really come back to life.
Well, and since you're the one to get the next question first. Stay right there. And actually, let's follow up on that. And I'm thinking for some of these more, some of the things maybe lend themselves to the 2-1-1, but I think this one, I have the stopwatch. So I think you can each have 2 minutes on this because there's a lot to it. And I don't want shallow answers and you to be frustrated by that. But, there's two aspects of that. One is the robust economy, which includes young families moving here or staying here and all of that. And I also want to end up talking about revenues on the other side of it. But let's just start with the economy. How do we attract young individuals and families? And part of that question, I sort of amalgamated. We had like 35 questions. And so I sort of lumped some things together. But part of that was also the role of broadband and how we'd get that both statewide and affordable. So ideas, you've got 2 minutes, Tim, on the how we make this economy robust, how we attract young families to either move here or stay here rather than move out, and the issue of broadband and internet development.
Great. Well, I'll start with the issue of young people. And having graduated from UVM, I watched as many people left the state because they couldn't find jobs that paid enough to allow them to afford to live here. So it's been very real for me, my friends, for the last 20 years since I graduated from UVM. I think one of the primary things we have to do is focus on affordable home ownership and expanding the number of rental housing units to bring down housing costs. Absolutely critical. The issue of broadband, also important, especially for our more rural communities. Back during the stimulus program, when the federal government provided substantial support during the Great Recession, VTEL, which is of course local to Windsor County, received a more than $100 million grant from the federal government to deliver high-speed internet to every unserved Vermonter. Once VTEL failed to deliver on that grant, it disqualified other Vermont entities for seeking money from the federal government to deliver high-speed broadband to underserved people. Now, with the $1.25 billion federal CARES money, which Senator Leahy helped get us, is the first meaningful opportunity with substantial dollars on the table to help make sure we're delivering broadband to every nook and cranny of the state. I
Great.
also think we have to celebrate our outdoor recreation economy, because the story we tell for young people is that the quality of life here is exceptional. The public schools are exceptional, and we're going to continue to try to drive down those cost of living basics for every person. In terms of the broader economy, which you also asked about, to me, so far under governor after governor, the strategy has been to try to lure companies here with tax incentives. In my view, what we should do is first celebrate the pioneers in corporate social responsibility, many of whom are right here in Vermont, where they started and grew their companies, and make that the defining characteristic of the entire state of Vermont's economic development policies, where we reward companies that are investing in their employees and taking care of the environment, and get out of the race to the bottom scenario, which too many governors find enticing because it allows them to send out a couple press releases when they lure one company a year.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Next, Debbie, you're up for, and I'm not going to, you have up to 2 minutes. You don't have to do a whole 2, but I think it's too important, and there's enough subparts of the question that I don't want to cut anyone off. So go ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we attract people to Vermont by making Vermont the best that it can be for the people who are already here. And I think that really should be our top priority, because if we make the very best Vermont we possibly can, then other people in other parts of the country will see that, whether they're younger or they're older, or I don't really care what age they are. If they come and contribute to our communities and to our economy, then they're more than welcome, as far as I'm concerned. I think, again, I'm going back to my three issues. If our housing was less expensive, both home ownership and rental, that would be so much better for all the people who live here now, and it would be much more attractive to people considering coming here. If we were able to have the best healthcare system in the country that's paid for equitably, and more with taxes and less with premiums and, letting insurance companies run rampant. Again, and if we took some of the burden off of our businesses to pay healthcare by paying for it in other ways, again, we would attract people from other parts of the country. And if we had wages that were good, if we had treatment of workers that was excellent, like paid family leave, and if we had things like childcare that we considered to be a public good, that we invited our businesses maybe to be a part of, but also certainly invested in by the state to make sure that our workers were relaxed and able to be productive because they knew their children were being well taken care of. All of those things would serve the Vermonters that we have here now, and they would attract other people. But also specifically around economic development, I think it's very important for us to be a leader in the green economy. I've helped introduce Green New Deal. I think the energy sector is a great sector that could provide employment and that would fit in completely with our values and our love of our landscape. And then also, I think we should continue to promote our creative economy. They've taken a big hit because a lot of them are independent contractors, and COVID has really hurt them. But
we'll have to call it there. But that's good. Thank you. No, that's all right. And Brenda, you're up next. I think. Yep, you should be good.
Yep, I am. So I think that in order to attract people here, we can't have, so every state around us except New Hampshire will be at $15 an hour by 2023 and have paid family medical leave programs. We cannot attract young families here. I was a 25-year-old single mom alone with a baby. I lived here because my family lived here and they could help me some. And I couldn't have done that otherwise. I needed to be where I could make a living. And that determined my economic outcome for my future. That determined my son's upbringing. And so if we want to have if we want to invite people here, the first thing we need to do is get ourselves caught up at least with the states that surround us, who are also beautiful states. We also need to build our economy, like I said before, from the bottom up. And I will take up on that creative economy network. So, for example, in Windham County, I don't have the Windsor County numbers in front of me, but $43 per person comes into the economy for every event that they attend. In terms of a creative event. So that means that if you fill the Latches Theater just down the road from a lot of you, an hour, then we are bringing $130,000 into our economy just that night. And so we really do need to put more into that. Also, $1 billion was put into our economy from the arts in 2015. So I think that we really do need to structure more. And then we do need to be leaders on the Green Mountain New Deal. We need to build that green economy. This is our moment right now. Like I said before, this is our moment to build the economy that a lot of us have been screaming from the rooftops about. Right now, we have this opportunity to do it better, to build better. And so I do think that brings people to Vermont because Vermont is beautiful. I love it here. I stayed here once my son was old enough because I love it here. And I want it to work for other families, and I want it to work for me.
Great. Thank you. And Molly, you're up for that. Oops, I got to do that.
Thank you. The question that you ask is the exact reason why I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. I am committed to addressing the constellation of challenges and creating the constellation of opportunities that are going to make Vermont a safe, healthy, and welcoming place to live, not only for a generation that's committed to being here now, but to a generation that wants to move to Vermont or move home to Vermont. Let's face it, we have done a good job of addressing COVID-19. Our numbers are down. We have taken safety and security very seriously. I don't think we're going to have to welcome people to Vermont and say this is the place because we know it is the place. What we haven't done is invest in communities, invest in families, and taken the steps to make Vermont an affordable, welcoming place to live. This is broadband for our communities, including the 1 in 3 children in Newberry, where I grew up, who still don't have access to the internet. And there are homes there. There are lots of empty homes. It's investing in workforce development and education, our technical and vocational centers, so you can graduate from a high school like Oxbow High School and stay in the state if you want and have a good paying jobs, because those jobs do exist. It's investing in childcare, and it's investing in paid family leave. And I want to take a moment just to explain why that is so important. 20% of our population here in Vermont is over the age of 65. And that's not old. That's my parents. I came home because I wanted to be close to them, because I wanted to support the farm, because I wanted to be near my family. But I should never have to choose, and no Vermonter should have to choose between paying the bills and taking care of a parent. If we want Vermont to be the place that it should be, the Vermont that we want for each of us, we need to invest in families. It's childcare, it's paid family leave, it's caring for our elders, and creating a bright future for our infants, our students, for each other, and for ourselves.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, while we're on the economy a bit, well, the other side of the economy is revenues coming into the state, and one of our members, actually, again, it was a couple of our members, and I amalgamated the questions, but there were things that it touched on. Well, how would you feel about casino gambling? I guess there's something on the table, perhaps. The cannabis industry development, or the development of the cannabis industry, adjusting second home and rental property taxes, and again, that might vary from county to county, but there's certainly in Windsor County, and particularly in my town or two, there's a lot of homes that are becoming BNB type things. And would you consider any of these? And I don't think the people that asked them were hoping that you were. I really don't know what their thoughts were. But are there other options that you would envision to rebuilding the state's financial solvency and reserves? And for that, well, Molly, you're there. Why don't you do it first? And I'll give, again, each of you gets 2 minutes for this. So go for it.
So again, I think it all comes back to investment and return on investment. If we want to expand our tax base and grow more revenue in Vermont, we have to be able to attract people here, which is why paid family leave, investing in our families, investing in our state colleges, investing in an economy that is resilient in the face of climate change is so important. Although when it comes to our unique Vermont identity, I think there are a couple areas where we need to put more emphasis. One, we do have one of the strongest food systems in the country. All you need to go is to the NOFA conference up in Burlington in the winter and meet the thousands of young farmers and food producers are here. I think the more that we can promote our strong, resilient, diverse agricultural economy, that's one area we can grow more revenue. When it comes to cannabis, I can certainly say as a prosecutor working statewide, I think that we're moving in the right direction, that we want to spend more of our time and have our law enforcement officials focus on public safety and less on crimes related to cannabis here in Vermont. I'm not sure cannabis is going to make up the gap that we have. I think our focus should be on investment in our local economies, in our rural communities, in our downtowns, in our restaurants and small businesses like Dan and Witt's, like the Worthy Burger, like so many of the businesses operating in Woodstock. I think we need to begin to get our businesses up and running again to support them in a way that is aligned with public health and public safety. We're doing that every single day. That is our challenge and call to action in the months ahead and into the fall and as we think for the future. But again, it all comes back to how do we get a generation here? And we do that by investing in the programs and policies that are going to make Vermont a wonderful place to live.
So we probably shouldn't look for your support on casino gambling then.
I do love playing cards, but I don't think casino gambling is our future.
All right. You can still do that. Brenda, you're up next on that. And you can address any of those specific things. And again, those weren't all, the way those questions came in, I really wasn't clear as to whether that person was supporting that or wanted to see taxes on second homes. I know that I mean, there's a number of those things that get talked about. So, but your ideas on how we build our not only state but municipal revenues, which end up being all tied together, of course, around education and so forth.
So I actually think that first, I just want to say that I support tax and regulate system. We're not entirely sure how much money it will bring in, but the estimate was 25 to 60 million. I like to use the low estimate of 25 million until we actually know how much would come in. I think it also protects as someone who's been very focused on substance use disorder, I think that also protects our kids better from running into harder drugs that turn into in my family loss. And so that I think is extremely important. I don't know if it's entirely for the revenue piece, but I think it's an essential piece of what we do right now. We also must invest in paid family medical leave and livable wage, because those, if you can consider that there's a number of people in our state, including in your area, there's 31% of your area is making under $30,000 a year, who don't provide tax revenue at all to the state, because we have children and we are getting money back. And so one big way for us to increase our revenue is to bring the wages up so we actually have tax revenue coming in. And that's actually a double positive, because a win-win, because that money also gets returned into our local communities. We know that money goes into our businesses and our restaurants. And so we need to focus on having strong jobs and wages. And that also includes a green economy. So I would say that building that green economy right now is an essential way to bring in that revenue, because it also brings in strong jobs. It also saves money for families across the state. So it really does start to bring us there. And then investing in the arts, as I said before, really investing in the arts, because it is a huge part of our economic growth in each and every community across the state. And it's policy that I've worked on in local governments to get arts funding, and it is helping and making a difference.
Great, thank you. Debbie, you're next on this.
Okay, thank you. Anytime we talk about revenue, I have to think of the federal government. And, we're Democrats. We got to get rid of these Republican administrations and the Republicans in the Senate who refuse to tax the mega rich and refuse to tax corporations. So I just have to say that whenever I hear any discussion of revenue, if the federal government actually tried to do something about income inequality and tax people at the rate that they ought to be taxed, and paid for some of the programs that we all know in this country that we ought to have, instead of pushing things down to the states, we'd already be in much better shape. But to get more directly to the question about state revenues, there is some room, I think, at the top of the wealthiest Vermonters, because they have benefited from some of these federal tax cuts for wealthy people, to tax them at slightly higher rates. And I think especially if it's couched in this difficult pandemic time as kind of Snelling surcharge, we could certainly increase our revenues from some of those folks. I don't think casinos are a great idea. I don't want to encourage them. I definitely support tax and regulate for cannabis, but in the State House, we've spent the money that we would raise from that 6 times over already. So that's a little bit difficult. There are other things that we could tax, like sugar beverages. I talk frequently with people in the healthcare advocacy area who want us to try to change behavior by taxing some of these things that are bad for people's health. But truly, I think revenue in the end really ought to, the richest people ought to pay their fair share, and corporations ought to pay their fair share at the federal level, and stop pushing things down to the states.
All right, great, thank you. It's already come up a couple of times. Brenda mentioned it, and in fact, Brenda, I'll let you start this one out. And let you kind of flesh out a little bit more what you
Al, I hate to
imagine.
interrupt, I hate to interrupt you, Al. Do I get to weigh in on that last one?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've got, no, thank you very much for doing that.
I hope that doesn't seem cyber pushy. I just
No,
thought
no, I would have felt,
benefit by an assist.
very guilty had
No, all right.
that
But-
slipped by.
Let me just speak briefly about it. I was the chair of the Senate's Finance Committee for 4 years, and I'm not one of these people who lists my committees as something that the public is probably going to care too much about. But I heard for many years people who wanted to spend money on every program, and when the moment came to name which tax they wanted to raise, they all ran for the hills. And despite that, we had Governor Shumlin, who said he didn't want to raise any broad-based taxes and that he'd veto them. We have Governor Scott, who has said he would veto any tax increase, any fee increase. Despite that, I helped lead a reform of our tax code that raised approximately $50 million additional from the highest earning Vermonters to get us through hard times. We also raised significant fees that hadn't been raised in a long time on out-of-state financial brokers who make a lot of money off of Vermonters. Tax and regulate a seed-to-sale marijuana system. I've helped lead that through the Senate 3 times. The House has been a little less enthusiastic, but it does seem like now we're on the verge of passing that sometime before we wrap this year, which I think is really important. Paid family leave has come up several times, and I'll just say, absolutely, we must get it done. The Senate has developed a veto-proof majority on that. As you know, I'm sure if you're following the news, the House fell just 1 vote short, so I would look forward to twisting the arm of any one of the people who had voted no if they return in January.
Great. Thank you. And again, thank you for, I've got all these, I get this other monitor and it's already changed from what I thought it would, I already
I've
moved
already
things
forgiven you.
around.
Al,
Huh?
I've forgiven you already.
Yeah, thank you. I knew you would, but I feel bad ever making an error. But what I was thinking was to have Brenda, because she's the one that's mentioned, and I'm not saying others have mentioned it as well, but you seem to keep coming back to a Vermont version of the Green New Deal, if you will. And I was wondering if you could put more details into how that would look and how, just get more specific. Are you unmuted yet? No. Now that I've got you up there, how do I unmute you if I'm down there? Oh, gosh. All right, hold on a sec. Up here, I can do it. All right, ask to unmute. There it is. Okay, you should be good now. Yes?
Took a second, but I'm good now.
Okay, good.
So I think that, or let me just talk about the Green Mountain New Deal a little bit. The reason that I am a fan of a Green New Deal or Green Mountain New Deal instead of other types of building a green economy or other ways that it's been translated is because it's the first time when AOC introduced her Green New Deal, it's the first time that I saw the environmental justice aspect centered around marginalized communities. So Black and Brown communities, Indigenous communities, migrant workers, low-income families and folks, women. We really do need to center it there. So that's why I think that's the impetus for that. But then also, it really addresses every aspect of our economy and the way that we're building our economy. So when we're doing this, transportation in Vermont, you have to look at each area. So in Vermont, transportation is a huge carbon emitter. So I'm on the Public Transit Advisory Commission, and I've worked really hard listening and also asking a lot of questions about why we're not, for example, trying microtransit in rural areas. Why are we thinking about how if we don't access low-income and aging populations, then we aren't really solving the problems that come with the carbon emissions from transportation. And so each and every one of these renewable energy, getting to 100% renewable energy, each and every one of those has to be centered around how do we access the people who will not be able to access it with tax incentives, who will not be able to access it in other ways. So we need to it will take a strategic investment. We will have to be willing to spend money in order to do this. However, if we don't do it, then down the line, we're going to spend more money. And any person in poverty understands that we are spending a lot of money not paying for the things that we need.
There are some things we're doing now, though, right? I mean, in fact,
Right.
there are
Yeah.
incentives like with heat pumps and electric cars, and I mean, I see these,
Right.
and have taken advantage of some things as well.
Right. So those incentives are excellent. I can't access them as a low-income single mom. I have to drive the whatever gas guzzler I can afford that costs $2,000 or $5,000, and I don't really have much choice there. So I think that we have taken that step, and we need to take it one step further, where a person like me can have. I live in a very sunny space. A person like me can have solar panels.
Okay,
And
I got
so
you.
I think that's when we center it there, then we actually get to the 100% renewable energy. Then we actually get to the clean environment. And we also, at the same time, are building these green jobs and allowing for families who are struggling to access better paying jobs and be able to stay in our state or come to our state.
Great, thank you. That helped. Thank you, Tim. You're next on that. If you could, and it doesn't have to be specifically the Green Mountain New Deal or whatever, but solar, wind, green investment. How you'd see that improving.
Great. Yeah, I've helped co-author virtually every climate change fighting piece of legislation since I first walked in the doors of the Vermont Senate. I've also helped beat back proposals to make it much more difficult to develop clean renewable power here in Vermont. As I look ahead, I've also developed a couple solar projects and done probably the largest residential weatherization project in Vermont's history, a 108 apartment deep energy retrofit. When I look ahead, there are a few key things that I will advocate for very strongly. The first, and this is our worst environmental sector, is transportation. I have been the most vocal proponent in the legislature, perhaps in Vermont, for the Transportation and Climate Initiative. This is a regional partnership of states as well as Washington, D.C., looking to guarantee a reduction in transportation emissions through an auction process, which will in turn send dollars to Vermont to invest in smart transportation strategies. The reason that's so important to me on the investment side is, having worked in affordable senior housing for almost a decade, I know how isolated many people can be with very few options if they're not basically in Burlington, Winooski, or Essex, Vermont for frequent public transportation. So having the money to invest in microtransit and other public transit strategies is absolutely critical for the long term. We have to accelerate the date by which we are asking all of our utilities to have 100% renewable power. We are on the path to do that. I've introduced legislation that would be, I believe, amongst the quickest requirements in the nation. And it would also increase the percentage of that power which has to actually be developed here in Vermont and not be imported from somewhere else. This is also a moment where I believe we have to significantly boost the efficiency of residential and commercial buildings. In the past, the Treasurer has strongly opposed virtually any new bonding programs because apparently the rating agencies always do a fantastic job and look out for us. While we do not want to be reckless with the state's credit rating, this is exactly the moment to bond on a significant level for weatherization across the state, which would actually put more money into the Treasury than the cost of the bond interest in the first place. That would, along with the transportation side, significantly reduce the state's contribution to harmful emissions that cause climate change.
Great.
But I'll say one thing overarching everything else. I believe that fighting climate change will require us to stop talking about it like it's the purview of people who have financial resources and everybody else is sort of a bit player.
Right.
In order to truly fight climate change, we have to enlist a broad swath of people who don't think about the environment first, so that they will be part of this movement.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Molly, you're next on that, and I've done that, and I've put you in the spotlight. I'm not sure why the spotlight. I have to do manually now. It was doing it all by itself, but now I have to do it every time. So go ahead.
All we need to do is look to Hurricane Irene and how Hurricane Irene impacted South Royalton and Bethel and Windsor County in particular, to know that our rural communities are the first to be hit by the impact of climate change. It's also our rural communities throughout Orange County, where I grew up, and Windsor County, where you know you have to drive to get to the grocery store, to get to school. There's so much we can do, but we cannot leave our rural communities behind, and our communities have to be whole and they have to be supported. So I think our task and our call, we talk a lot about the Green New Deal, but let's talk about what it is, or what the opportunity is for Vermont. The opportunity is investing in the jobs that promote a climate resilient Vermont. Jobs in weatherization, weatherizing those homes in Orange County so that people want to live there and they're more affordable. Providing more fuel efficient vehicles so folks can drive and pay less at the pump. It's more solar panels and incentives for solar. And I'm going to come back to broadband for a moment. There is a woman in Wells River, it's outside of Newberry, who takes 2 forms of transportation to get down to Mary Hitchcock for a checkup. That's something that should be accessible via telemedicine. So if we invest in broadband, we're also going to mitigate the impact of climate change. And that is our call to action. And I'll end with this. We have done some things in Vermont, and there's an opportunity to lead further, but we haven't done enough. We have a Global Warming Solutions Act that's sitting in the Senate that was passed by the House. We have a Transportation Climate Initiative that is an important step for Vermont and working with our regional partners to reduce climate emissions. There's more we can do, and we need a lieutenant governor who's going to bring smart solutions, bring us together, and help us act, because COVID-19 is just a test run for climate change.
Great, thanks. And Debbie, I think that that's you now for, yes?
Great, yes, I am.
Yeah, all right, you're unmuted now. Go ahead.
There was noise in my house. I had to mute for a minute. Yes, I am a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus in the Senate, and we've had some great leaders, and it's a Senate and House caucus. I'm co-sponsoring many of the bills that we have, but I would agree that efficiency of our homes and buildings, a switch to renewable energy, and then looking at our transportation sector are the 3 areas that we need to focus on to get us to some kind of green economy. I have supported a proposal that would set up a fund that would get revenue from the highest, a tax surcharge on the highest incomes that would pay for energy conservation programs like weatherization and thermal efficiency and renewable heating systems. I very much support TCI, and especially if we can do all 12 states in the regional cap and invest program. I support 100% renewable energy to make sure that our grid is green by 2030, and puts caps on how much energy we can get from some of these big hydro dams. And yeah, and I also support the Global Warming Solutions Act that Molly mentioned, that I do hope that we can get it passed in the Senate as well. So yeah, lots of good ideas going on, but we really have to have a sense of urgency. We have to listen to our young people, especially. They've been great advocates, and we've got to take action now.
Great, appreciate that. We're approaching 8:30. I think I had this as an hour and a half. I'd go to 11. I don't care, but you all probably have other things that you want to do. Was your impression was 8:30 is the end, correct? Yeah. Okay. So I thought maybe we'd end the way we started. Something of a summarization. Ask for their votes, and we have you up already, Debbie. So why don't you start that, and anything you choose to say.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks. It's been wonderful to be with you tonight. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Debbie Ingram. I would like to be your next Lieutenant Governor. I believe that my combination of skills and experience are perfect for this position. I pledge to you, if you elect me, that I will go across the state talking about issues that are on Vermonters' minds, and most of all, listening to everyday Vermonters to hear what their ideas and their solutions are. I promise also to listen to people in the State House and create a collegial and attitude, mindset where we can all work together. And I believe that my experiences in elected office and in my life, in taking some hard knocks and coming through on the other side, make me the kind of leader that we need for the coming out of this crisis.
Thank you very much. Tim, I'm going left to right here, so you're next on my left to right.
I'm not sure if that was a political statement.
No, just on my screen.
The way Zoom's working.
That could be another question, but go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks, Al, and thanks to the whole Windsor Democratic Committee. It's been really fun tonight. My name's Tim Ash. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. I think I have the tested leadership experience, a very dynamic record, both inside and outside of government, to make positive, progressive change. I've worked with coalitions to pass some of the most progressive legislation anywhere in the country the last 3 years. I've been proud to work alongside Speaker Mitzi Johnson. We have had an uphill battle sometimes because we're faced a governor who, on almost every single issue where more investment is needed, he has been prepared to veto everything in sight. He has set a record, in fact, for the most vetoes. So we have always been working uphill and having to get to 20 votes in the Senate and 100 votes in the House instead of just sheer majorities the way you normally would have to. I truly believe that what animates my public service for the last 20 years has been my desire to close the gap between what I call the two Vermonts. Too many people work hard, play by the rules, but can't get ahead because power structures are in the way. They don't get paid fairly. They don't have the benefits available to them that people who make more money have. They are more at risk of environmental hazards, public health issues. They're more likely to not be able to seek medical care. And I have pursued a non-elitist approach to governing for 20 years, making sure that we try to meet the needs of the most vulnerable people in our society. I also believe that now is the time to focus our state's economic development policies on the triple bottom line that has been pioneered by people throughout the state over the last 20 years in the socially responsible business movement. We should get out of the business of racing to the bottom and showering people with tax incentives, even if they pay poverty wages. And we should reward the businesses that are growing here, that pay good wages, that provide good benefits, and really care about the environment while they happen to also make a profit. So I hope I can count on your support, and I'm certainly available in the next 2 months for any questions you have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Brenda, you're up next.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me. I'm Brenda Siegel, and I hope that you are excited tonight and I can earn your vote. And over the next 2 months, if you have any questions you'd like to ask me, please email me, Brenda@BrendaForVermont, and I will directly answer or set up meetings with any of you. I think that it's extremely important. I was raised by grandparents who had fought incredibly hard in the civil rights movement. My grandfather wrote the screenplay to Roots. His brother was a civil rights attorney in New York City working on Chicago 7. I was taught from a very young age that we have to stand up to injustice. Right now, there is injustice all across our state, and I had no expectation of ending up low income and as an adult, and I have raised my child with very little money and very little resources, and somehow we've made it to high school graduation. And in that process, what I have learned is that it's extremely important that we center those voices when we're creating policy. It isn't enough just to fight for people who are struggling. We need to fight with in partnership. We need to make sure that we're building an economy and a state that really works for all Vermonters. I know that it can seem like, you know, as much as we've all tried, it has not worked. We have not, people like me are still struggling. And in the last 2 months, I've been food insecure. And I'm very lucky that we have resources right now. And so what I think we have to do in this moment in time is grasp it, hold on to it, and bring marginalized leaders to every level of state government, because that's what it's going to take to ensure that we get the changes that we want and need to see across the state. And my experience in working with the economy and on the ground and in the legislature makes me more than prepared to do this, exactly the kind of work that we're going to need coming out of this crisis.
Great. Thank you, Brenda. And Molly, you are, you're the cleanup hitter here. You've got it.
Well, I want to begin by thanking you, Al, thanking everyone who joined us via Zoom tonight. It's wonderful to be back in Windsor County virtually. I hope the next time is in person. Thank you to everyone who's joining us via Facebook. Here's the thing. This is a historic election, not only nationally, but right here in Vermont. We have an opportunity to elect some new energy and new leadership for this new moment and new era that we're in. We no longer can allow Vermonters to be left behind when it comes to broadband or childcare or paid family leave or workforce development. We have to stand tall. We need to move forward. We need to come together and work together. I grew up in Newbury. My family still farms there. I'm a product of our education system and a proud graduate of the University of Vermont. I've worked in Washington. I've led field missions of policymakers into conflict zones, into Baghdad and Basra in the Niger Delta. I worked around the world, and I came home because I love our state and I care about our future. I've lived in communities across Vermont, in Tunbridge, in Bethel, in Rutland, in Burlington, and in Montpelier, where I now serve as an assistant attorney general. I've run statewide investigations. I've worked with prosecutors and victim advocates. I prepared to bring my experience, which is rich and diverse, to the Lieutenant Governor's office to take us forward at this critical moment and to be a real partner, not only for my fellow senators in the Lieutenant Governor's office should I be elected, but for the House and for the administration. And every day I am preparing to lead and will be prepared on day one to do so. So I thank you all for your time tonight. I look forward to earning your vote. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to being a real partner for our state as we move forward and transform. Thank you for joining us tonight. And you can find more information about my candidacy and be in touch by visiting mollyforvermont.com. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. This is, oh boy, that looks, I don't have good lighting on mine, but it was great having the four of you. What a great decision we have to make. I mean, we've got four great people, and I really appreciated your answers and your thoughtfulness. And we got it done. There's a bunch of questions we didn't get to, so c'est la vie. But I think we learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much. And for you joining us on Facebook, thank you from there. And we'll look to see you all in about next week, same time. Next Monday at 7 o'clock will be the three gubernatorial candidates. Have a great week between now and then. Bye.
Thanks, Al.